Hundreds of ships have started life in this city, but where the banks of the river were once lined with cranes, there are now offices, apartments and art centres. So I'll be exploring how Newcastle upon Tyne's past resonates in people's lives here today. There's history here, industry and wisdom that spans back into the mists of time as a rich resource on which modern-day Newcastle has grown and flourished. Today, our songs of praise come from the city suburb of Gosforth, where Trinity Church is a good example of what was old being used in a new way. Every week, about 70 different groups, that's 2,000 people or more, make use of this building for everything from chats over a cuppa in its cafe to worship. And when it comes to music in worship, the congregation here enjoy modern favourites as well as traditional treasures, like the majestic hymn that we're about to start with today. It was written by Charles Wesley nearly 200 years ago. Old it may be, but its message still feels as relevant as ever. Think of Newcastle and you think of coal, except that cargo ships loaded with coal heading out to sea are an image of times gone by, really, because nowadays commercial vessels making their way up and down the Tyne are likely to be carrying anything but coal. And they have to share the river with users who are simply there because they love it, like members of the Tynemouth Rowing Club, who have their centre here. 7 years ago, Nina Laurie discovered the benefits of rowing when she joined the club.
Well, this is a rather baggy Tynemouth Rowing Club sweatshirt. It's because I've gone down 2 dress sizes since training for the Great Tyne Row, which is a big race. I trained for that last year, and I've kept the dress sizes down. So the Great Tyne Row is really part of continuing the really amazing history of rowing on the Tyne. From those heydays of the 1880s, now we have this race that is attracting people from all over the UK and attracting people again to the banks of the river to watch rowing. And in the light of the Olympics and how great rowing is in the UK, I think that's a fantastic thing.
Sometimes you row on your own, often you row with a team. What difference does that make?
I wouldn't want to do either just one or the other. The rowing in a team, particularly here, I make a joke with people who just row on flat rivers saying, you know, you've got no idea what it's like. Come down to Tynemouth and you'll see what rowing on a few waves is like, because you really get a thrill from it. But also the rowing alone, for me, you know, for rowing you can practice your technique, but more for me that is a very spiritual moment. It's often where I go to take things I need to sort of think about and process. It's also somewhere where I can just feel that I can just be with God. What for me is wonderful about rowing at Tynemouth is you have these two piers and they sort of almost meet in the middle and the big ships come through. And I often feel that those arms are like two arms of God holding me. The waves come and you're in this small single boat and you're cast out at sea, and I have this real sense then of the awesomeness of creation, but also of God being close by.
This northeast corner of England looked very different around the 7th century when the early Celtic saints like Aidan, Cuthbert and Bede were drawn to its isolation and wild beauty. It's hard to imagine how Jarrow, now a suburb of Newcastle, looked then when it was home to the Venerable Bede, known today as the brilliant scholar who wrote a renowned history of the English church and people. But when you take a look around Bede's world, this exhibition centre dedicated to his life, you can see there was a great deal more to Bede than just monastic devotion and academic scholarship. Inspired by his surroundings, Bede applied his questioning mind to the mysteries of creation. As he watched the tide rising and falling, he started taking measurements, comparing his findings to the phases of the moon, and discovered how the gravitational pull of the moon governs the tide. So for Bede, faith and science were perfectly compatible, a belief that sits comfortably with the scientist I'll be talking to next, after we hear from the High Kings, singing words that are often attributed to St. Dallan, an Irish saint who loved academic study a century before the Venerable Bede.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Be all else but not to me, save that thou art. Be thou my best thought in the day and by night, both waking and sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true word, be thou ever with me, and I with thee, Lord. Be thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Be thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Be thou mine inheritance, now and always. Be thou and thou only the first King of heaven, thou heaven's bright sun, oh, grant me its joys after victory is won. Great heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be thou my vision, O ruler of all.
Tom McLeish is a Fellow of the Royal Society and Professor of Physics at Durham University. I met him at St Paul's Church in Jarrow, which is on the site of the monastery where Bede lived and worshipped. So there you are at the cutting edge of scientific research, and yet you have this fascination with Bede. 1300 years ago he lived.
Yeah.
Why is he so fascinating to you?
Well, I love the intense interest Bede had in nature. One of the things that upsets me about science is when we distance it, and one of the reasons we distance it, we think of it as very modern, only post-Newton or Galileo or something like this. But actually, I think of science as the name for the current chapter in a book with many, many previous chapters. And Bede tells us all about that. So Bede was doing what we'd now call science. He wrote a book for his students in about the year 700 called De Natura Rerum, on the nature of things. And he talks about the stars, the planets, the colours of the sky, earthquakes, the salty water of the sea. He explains that people shouldn't be in ignorance of the world, because when shadows fall or earthquakes happen or lightning strikes, they shouldn't think of nature as being full of demons or spirits out to get them. They should understand this is just nature working out in its own way how God created it to be. So he has a theological purpose for doing science. You might be surprised to hear that many of the great scientists through the ages, the predominant number of them were Christians. There's a small but very loud minority of believers want to insist on a very over-literal interpretation of the Genesis creation story, ignoring rather sadly the other 20 creation stories in the Bible that are written in different ways that we want to treat equally. But I think also it's important to see the Bible as giving us the commission to do science. It's inviting us to participate with God in his work of healing, of discovering creation, of helping it to explore new ways of being. That's what the Bible is inviting us to do, and that's why it's entirely compatible with Christian belief and calling.